15th March 1939. German troops march through the streets of Prague, their boots echoing on cobblestones, and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia is proclaimed. The Gestapo makes its headquarters in the heart of the city, but citizens refuse to bend, joining the underground resistance, helping families of the persecuted, and enduring arrest, interrogation, and years of Nazi prisons. They survive the war, liberated by the Allies in 1945, worn down by suffering but unbroken in spirit. The end of the Second World War brings the hope of rebuilding democracy, and one such figure takes a place in Parliament as a respected voice for social justice and women's rights. Yet, a new shadow falls across Prague. The Communist Party, backed by Moscow, seizes power in 1948, crushing the limited democracy that had briefly returned. This voice of defiance, which once stood against Hitler, now warns that freedom is again being strangled. For speaking out, she is watched, arrested, and condemned in a show trial scripted by Stalinist advisors. Her name is Milada Horáková. Milada Horáková was born as Milada Králova on 25th of December 1901 in Prague, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Her father, Czechoslovakia Král, was a civil servant who valued education, discipline, and public duty. Her mother, Anna, cared for the household and raised Milada and her three siblings, two of whom died at an early age. From an early age, Milada showed independence of thought. To this day, there is a widespread legend that Milada Horáková, at the age of 17, while still in school, joined a demonstration against the First World War, which had started in the summer of 1914. According to this story, Milada was arrested and briefly expelled from the school. Although recent research has cast doubt on this story, its existence shows the era in which Milada Horáková grew up, and there is no doubt that she had a long-standing interest in public affairs. The establishment of Czechoslovakia in October 1918 was a formative moment for her generation. The country was built on ideals of democracy and self-determination, and young people like Milada felt a sense of mission. She studied law at Charles University in Prague, one of the oldest universities in Europe. As a student, she became active in the women's movement, working with figures such as Františka Plamenková, a senator and advocate for female equality. Horáková was especially concerned with the position of women in society and campaigned for their right to education and professional advancement of women. In 1926, she graduated, and that same year she married Bohuslav Horák, a man who shared her democratic convictions and whom she had met during her university studies. They lived in Prague, and in 1933 their daughter Jana was born. Both Milada and Bohuslav pursued their careers, Bohuslav as a journalist and Milada as a politician. She became involved with the Czechoslovak National Socialist Party, not related to the German Nazi movement of the same name, but a liberal, democratic party that supported parliamentary democracy, social reform, and national independence. She was respected for her intelligence, her clear manner of speech, and her personal integrity. Her early career was marked by a combination of legal practice, social work, and public engagement. She worked with organizations focused on the welfare of women and children, believing that democracy had to be lived in daily life, not just defended in parliament or during elections. The rise of Nazi Germany in the 1930s brought fear to Czechoslovakia. Adolf Hitler's demands on the Sudetenland, the Munich Agreement of September 1938, and the eventual occupation of the Czech lands on the 15th of March 1939 destroyed the state she had believed in. German troops marched into Prague, swastikas flying over the historic Prague castle, and the Gestapo, the German secret state police, established its offices in the very heart of the capital. Many Czechoslovak politicians went into exile, but Milada and her husband stayed. They joined the underground resistance in the Nazi-established Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Their activities were varied. They helped organize networks inside the Protectorate, arranged assistance for the families of arrested resistance workers, obtained secret information, and arranged for safe houses. The couple lived with constant danger, but the inevitable came, and on 2nd September 1940, the Gestapo arrested both Milada and Bohuslav. She was imprisoned in Prague's Pankrak prison, where many Czechoslovaks passed through cells on their way to execution. Later, she was transferred to the small fortress at Terezín, a Gestapo prison near Prague, and later to the city of Dresden in Nazi Germany. Horáková's trial took place there in October 1944, where she defended herself in German. The prosecutor proposed the death penalty, which the court ultimately changed to 8 years in prison. She served her sentence until April 1945 in a women's prison in the town of Aayi near Munich, where she was liberated by the U.S. Army. She endured harsh interrogations and years of imprisonment, separated from her family. Her husband was also imprisoned by the Germans, and their daughter, still a child, was raised by relatives. When the Second World War ended, Milada returned to Prague exhausted, but unbroken. The liberation of Czechoslovakia brought hope, and for a time, it seemed possible to rebuild democracy. In the elections of 1946, Milada Horáková was elected to the National Assembly, to the Czechoslovak Parliament, as a representative of the Czechoslovak National Socialist Party. She threw herself into the work of reconstruction, focusing on social policy, education, and women's issues. She was a respected member of parliament and continued her involvement in civic organizations, including the Council of Czechoslovak Women. But the balance of power was shifting rapidly. The Soviet Union dominated Eastern Europe, and within Czechoslovakia, the Communist Party gained increasing control. Horáková soon recognized the servile obedience of the Czechoslovak communists to Moscow and spoke loudly about it. Because of this, she was monitored by the STB, the State Security Service, which had been controlled by the communists since the end of the war. Horáková remained a vocal defender of democracy and opposed efforts to restrict political freedom and spoke for the independence of civic associations. Her speeches were clear and uncompromising. In February 1948, the crisis came when non-communist ministers resigned in protest against communist politics. However, communist-backed militias filled the streets of Prague and other cities, and President Edvard Beneš was forced to accept, under immense pressure, a new government dominated by communists and their collaborators. The coup destroyed the remnants of the democratic system in Czechoslovakia. Many politicians fled abroad again, but Milada chose to remain. She felt she must continue to speak for her principles, even under hostile conditions. She continued her public work, although under increasing surveillance. By 1949, the regime was preparing large show trials, modeled on Stalin's purges in the Soviet Union, to eliminate all potential opposition. On 27 September 1949, she was arrested by the state security. Milada Horáková was accused of leading a conspiracy to overthrow the communist regime, of espionage, and maintaining contacts with Western intelligence services. None of the charges had any basis in reality. During the long months of pre-trial detention, she was subjected to intense interrogation. Prisoners in such conditions were deprived of sleep, threatened and manipulated until they signed false confessions. Some broke completely, others tried to preserve fragments of dignity. Though Milada endured repeated interrogations, she never abandoned her core convictions. The trial, which opened on 31 May 1950, was staged for propaganda purposes. It was a show trial in the full Stalinist sense. The proceedings were broadcast on radio and reported in detail in the press. After the first 3 days, the court was literally flooded with hundreds of resolutions and letters from factories, offices, and municipalities calling for severe punishment, most for the death penalty. This was the result of instructions from the Communist Party apparatus. Alongside Milada, 12 others were tried, including her colleagues from the National Socialist Party. The prosecution accused them of plotting violent overthrow, of working for American intelligence, and endangering the state. Her defense was remarkable for its calmness. She did not deny her opposition to the communist system, but she refused to admit to false crimes. She insisted she had worked for the people of Czechoslovakia, not for foreign powers. She spoke with dignity, and for those who listened, her courage was unmistakable. However, their fate had already been decided outside the courtroom. This was the first major political trial in Czechoslovakia in which Soviet advisors played a significant role in its preparation, and for the first time, pre-prepared scripts for testimony and stage directions for the trial were used. On 8th of June 1950, when the court pronounced the sentence, 4 of the defendants, including Milada, were condemned to death. Appeals for clemency poured into Czechoslovakia from abroad. Among those who pleaded for her life were Winston Churchill, Albert Einstein, and Eleanor Roosevelt. But Klement Gottwald, the communist president of Czechoslovakia, refused mercy. Before her death, she wrote letters to her family. The brutality and malice of the communist regime is also evident in the fact that the authorities never handed them over to her loved ones. The letters only reached them in 1990, after the murderous regime fell in 1989. On the morning of 27th of June 1950, Milada Horáková was hanged in Pankrak prison. Her last words were, "I have lost this fight, but I leave with honor. I love this country. I love this nation. Strive for their well-being. I depart without rancor towards you. I wish you. The hangman probably didn't let her finish and began the execution. Her agony lasted almost a quarter of an hour. She did not die instantly from a broken neck on the gallows, but slowly suffocated to death. She was 48 years old. Her murder was one of the darkest acts of the communist regime, which continued to oppress and destroy the lives of Czechoslovak citizens for nearly 4 more decades until its collapse in 1989.